We have a question from a spiritual seeker, and they say, since my childhood, I have always felt different in many ways. Although I was a bright student, I often felt bored and restless. I was constantly searching for something, though I didn't know what it was. Around the age of 10, I began reading extensively, starting with philosophical books and eventually moving on to religious texts like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the works of Kabir and other saints available to me at the time. One significant thing that happened during my childhood was that knowingly and coincidentally, I experienced moments of meditation. Suddenly, everything would become silent, and I would be immersed in a profound sense of joy. However, by the time I could grasp what was happening, the state would vanish. Later, I learned that this was called dhyan or meditation. Over the years, I met many sadhus, but could never articulate what I was truly seeking. At the age of 20, someone gave me a book by Osho titled Dhyan Sutra. As I read it, I was captivated and couldn't put it down. While reading, I fell into a deep state of silence and meditation. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I had ever had. However, after reading that book, my life took a turn and I entered a phase of intense suffering that has only increased over time. I continued to read and listen to many books, explored various spiritual practices, visited gurus, and tried countless techniques, including vipassana. But my search remained incomplete. Meanwhile, I completed my studies, worked corporate job, got married, and now have a beautiful daughter. For the past 4 years, my life has been turned upside down. I have been experiencing unbearable pain, deteriorating health, and constant illness. I lost my job, my family, and in the last 2 months, even my ability to sleep. After numerous health checkups, doctors concluded that my issues are more psychological than physical. Currently, I'm unable to work for more than 2 hours at a time. I have lost 20 kg in the last 3 years and now weigh only 40 kg. I am 44 years old. Recently, I came across your videos on YouTube and was almost shocked to hear you speak about pain and suffering, especially the concept of the dark night of the soul. It felt as though you were speaking directly about my life. Since then, I have wanted to write to you, but today, while listening to your video titled Direct Experience of Reality, the illusion of seeking as a separate self, which are a part one, I couldn't stop myself from reaching out. I have experienced many things and always strive to stay present in the here and now, but the suffering persists. I am deeply grateful for your guidance and wisdom you share. I would be immensely thankful if you could offer me any advice. First advice would be to take as good care of yourself as possible. The only advice I give in such matters is just to relax. Relax to the best of your capacity. And when I say relax, I don't mean activity. I'm not talking in terms of activity or trying to quiet the mind by forcing inactivity. All I'm saying is just be and relax. It can happen sometimes that we get so fascinated by an idea of spiritual seeking that we create a strong identification as a spiritual seeker. But the thing is, till the seeking is going on, there will be no relief from suffering. Suffering ends when the seeking drops. The end of seeking is end of suffering. But when we are strongly identified with an outcome, our mind can lead us astray, even on the spiritual path. So, first is not to undermine your emotional state. Whatever is going on within, examine that. Let it arise in your awareness, in your consciousness. Let it play out. See where that content is manifesting. Try to be with that space where all these experiences are manifesting, where they are gaining momentum, and that momentum, what kind of sensation it is creating in your body. Just observe all of this and let that observation happens without trying to change anything, without trying to modify anything. Bringing yourself here and now is not a forced practice, but simply a remembrance. The point to remember here is that the seeker that is so identified with seeking is not separate from the seeking. Seeking is definitely happening, but there is no individual seeker. That is to be remembered. And when this is realized that the one trying to seek a reality based on one's idea of reality is a false notion, because there is no absolute reality. All that manifests is subject to change. But there is something changeless. There is an awareness that is changeless, that knows everything, that knows the changing and the unchanging, that is beyond all possible forms, all possible ideas and beliefs, all sort of perceptions. It is beyond everything. Just rest in that energy and be. And when that happens, the seeking drops, the concepts drop. All our suffering is happening because we are identified with concepts, where we read so many books, listen to so many gurus, and try to philosophize, try to find meaning of life. But in that trying to find meaning of life, purpose of life, trying to get to the absolute reality, the mind gets more and more entangled into the web of Maya. Well, mind is Maya or illusion. So, in the illusion, the illusory mind is trying to come out of the illusion using tools that are available within the illusion. It's like a character in the dream trying to wake up. The character cannot wake up unless the character is aware that it is dreaming. Because when in dream, the dream you, is completely identified with the dream world. But when you wake up, you realize that, oh, that was all false. So you see, you mention here that I met many sadhus but could never articulate what I was truly seeking. And this is the confusion with most of us. We do not truly know what we are seeking. This was the confusion with me when I went to a master and asked him that what is the cause of my suffering? And he asked me, he said, Jagjot, what do you want? What are you really seeking? And I gave some abstract answer, happiness, peace. He says, what is your idea of peace? That idea of peace is not going to be permanent. If you're trying to establish permanency in something, you're going to suffer. Because in this realm, there is nothing permanent. Everything is changing. And to accept change brings peace. To accept the situation the way it is in this very moment puts an end to the dark night of the soul, which includes that I may never be able to find that absolute peace or absolute happiness that I'm seeking. Then what happens? One drops the effort. And then the actions become effortless, and one sees God in everything. So, your family, your husband, your daughter, your parents, there is God in everything. You cannot deny one part of God and move to another part of God and say that I accept this God, but I do not accept that God. We have to accept God in everything. And that means even in relationships that are difficult, we have to accept the presence of godliness in them too. It doesn't mean that we have to stick to the relationship or tolerate abuse or tolerate psychological or tolerate any kind of behavior that disturbs our psyche. But we have to understand that there is God there too. Because God is not something separate from the world. God is what illumines the world and is also the world at the same time, which is consciousness. Consciousness that animates this reality. And who are we to question how God should or should not paint this reality, animate this reality? We can only accept that this is the way things are. Now, all these practices that you mentioned are beautiful, but they are most effective when they are done for their own sake, but not to achieve an outcome. If the mind is geared towards an outcome, that is effort. People misunderstand the meaning of effort. They think that, for example, let's take a very basic example. Bringing yourself here and now does require effort because mind is habituated to thinking. So you notice that when you're meditating, the mind goes into a certain direction. And then at some point there is this realization that, oh, I'm thinking. And that realization itself drops the thinking, it cuts the thinking and brings you here and now. But the mind habituated to move in the direction of thinking does not like that. So when you're still in the moment, completely in the presence, as the presence, mind again makes an attempt to move. What about my family? I am undergoing this trouble. I have this psychological problem. I have that problem, my family, my work life. It just flows here and there, here and there. It's just habituated like that. And again and again, you bring it here and now. That is effort. But that is not the effort that I talk about. This effort is effortless effort. It is just the natural effort of the working mind which just brings you here and now. The effort that I talk about is when the mind uses thinking to modify its movement. For example, let's say you were thinking something, all right? And all of a sudden the awareness cut off the thinking. You were probably identified with an idea that I'm unworthy. And you were thinking in that direction. My life is not good. Things are bad. I don't have the right job. I don't have the right relationships. And all of a sudden there is this recognition that, oh, I'm thinking. And you're brought back to the present moment. But then the mind again comes up and says, what are you doing? You are unworthy. Don't believe in other people who says you are worthy. You are unworthy and you must do something to correct that. That is the effort that is problematic. That is effort. Effortlessness is just bringing yourself here and now, which means you just block all the noise. Effortlessness is not easy. Putting effort is easy because it is natural for the mind to put effort. Effort is identification with an outcome. I feel this way. I should not feel this way. You see, these are two forces that are operating and pulling you apart in two different directions. So it is painful. To drop the resistance is effortlessness. So effortlessness is not easy, but it can be done right now here. It does not require concepts. You just drop it. That's it. You drop the idea that there is suffering. There is an individual who is suffering. There is suffering. We do recognize that. There is pain. There is sensitivity. We do recognize that. But the individual that thinks he or she is suffering is a conceptual thought. So knowing the illusory nature of the separate self itself brings you more and more into presence or here and now. Then all these ideas begin to vanish about attaining something which will give you everlasting happiness. And one accepts the never-ending cycle of pain and pleasure in life. But the thing is, the pain in the moment does not become suffering in horizontal time as shame, blame, guilt, malice. And happiness in the moment is enjoyed, but does not become pride and arrogance in the horizontal time. One accepts every moment the way it is presented. And nobody can know what the next moment will present. So being okay with this uncertainty, with this unpredictability of life, brings peace and happiness. I would say, if you have a beautiful family, you do have a beautiful family, you say you have a beautiful daughter, first of all, try and re-establish your connection with her at a deeper level. See God in her and serve in that way. And serve others too, without worrying about a personal spiritual upliftment, because that is an idea. These are all concepts we have, and we get so caught up in these concepts sometimes because we get fixated to this idea that I have attained this state of dhyana, or meditation, but even dhyan is not the ultimate if we talk conceptually, because dhyan is still the subject object split. Then we talk about samadhi, where the subject drops. And when the subject drops, the object also drops. So there is complete void, shunya. But even that is not a permanent state. You will still come back. Why? Because that is how phenomenality operates. That sense of separateness is not evil. Ego is not evil, it's not the enemy. It is there for a purpose. Because without ego, even you cannot do any service or seva. If you let your mind entangle you into this web of thought, which the mind loves to do, mind does not want your freedom. Mind wants entanglement, it wants drama, it wants thrill, it wants excitement, or it can even want sadness, because mind clings to what is familiar. It wants a repeat of experience that is familiar to it. It does not want something new, because new can be very challenging for the mind. When I say new, what I mean is something that is not touched by a past experience. Now investigate what is that is not touched by a past experience, because this itself is a meditation. Anything we describe, any state that is formed from the accumulation of past experiences, is not new. We get so enamored by books, teachers. We get so identified with this whole process that our mind starts an outward movement. And the very premise of that outward movement is that I am unwhole, that I am limited, that the way I am right now, I'm insufficient. That is the basic premise of this whole outward movement. And then it just expands outwardly, keeping this separation alive between me and the other. And this separation is suffering. But when one relaxes in their most natural state, now of course it doesn't mean that the ups and downs in life or emotional ups and highs and lows will not be experienced. It is not true. Everything will be experienced in life. You cannot stop that. All the states will be experienced. Emotional highs, lows, sensitivity, depression, anxiety, everything will be experienced. But when one learns to be more and more in their relaxed presence, what happens is that the amplitude of the highs and the lows becomes much smaller. That is the difference conceptually. That is the difference between a sage and an ordinary man. The ordinary man completely is identified with the highs and lows of life. Either it wants to remain in the high, by taking substances or, indulging in sexual activity or trying to chase thrill here and there, excitement here and there, relationships after relationships, this, that. It wants to remain in the high. But then inevitably the low comes into the picture. Because when you move, it's like a pendulum. When you move on one extreme, it already gathers momentum to go on to the other extreme. This is the nature of life. So when even people can get high on a spiritual quest, trying to attain something something blissful beyond any known realm. They can get, they can make that state as a fantasy in their mind, that once I achieve this super enlightenment or super or anything like that, that will solve all problems in my life. But that itself is a high that one is experiencing. The pendulum is moving in one direction. I'm very close. I'm about to achieve awakening or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, liberation, moksha. But then you're ready to swing on just on the other direction, which is I'm completely worthless. My life is horrible. My relationships are not working. I'm unworthy. I don't deserve goodness. We just swing on the other side. But if we just witness this movement of life that is happening in the case of an ordinary man, this is suffering. What happens in the case of a sage? Now, even the sage life does swing like a pendulum, but the swinging is not all that high. The amplitude is not all that high and low. So the sage just swings a little bit on one side and then immediately comes back on the other side. So the equilibrium is maintained, you know. So sage lives witnessing what is happening with complete acceptance. Acceptance of what is, things the way they are, is peace. And to accept the unpredictability of life and the changing nature of things brings peace and happiness. Other than that, I have not found any quest that can satisfy the mind, any idea, any concept that can satisfy the mind, because mind by nature is not designed to be satisfied. So if you're chasing an idea, thinking that eventually the mind will come to rest when you do steps A, B, and C, that itself can make the mind more active. And we do not want to make the mind more active because, as it is, most of us suffer from a lot of anxiety because the minds are continuously running. We are seeking information, we are consuming information all the time. And generally, the sources of our information are not very credible because in today's age, we get enamored very fast and we just believe anything we hear. So I would say, verify this through your own personal experience. Do not believe what I'm saying. Verify this through your own personal experience and then come to a conclusion. Life has to be lived fully. And that means one has to do their best with whatever the given situation is. And it is a blessing to have a family around. Especially a presence of a child can be very, very healing. So I would also say that there is no harm in taking help of a professional in this endeavor, because you see, psychological, physical, and spiritual are all interconnected. They are not different processes. And sometimes one has to accept that one cannot solve everything by themselves. So taking help is also an option. Do remember that. Search for the wholeness can create suffering, but knowing that wholeness is one's nature can instantly drop the suffering. Wholeness is not to be found externally. The only path that is possible is going inwards and looking at what is happening internally. It does not mean merely sitting idle and just looking at oneself all the time. What it means is keeping the observation as one moves through life, as one moves through challenges and relationships, as one moves through financial hardships, as one moves through, health challenges or anything in life. One keeps witnessing every process everything. And then there is this realization that whatever is changing is not real. No matter how intense the emotions may seem in a given moment, they are not real because they do not sustain. They come from that baseline neutral awareness that is always there. That awareness is like an ocean, it's vast. And emotions are like waves. We get identified with what is happening on the surface, but deep below the ocean, everything is calm. That is where you rest, in the depths of the ocean. And that ocean is within you. It is not externally. It is not in the books. It is not in the gurus. It is not in the talks. It is in the deep, deep silence that is within you. So just be and see it for yourself. I hope this helps. And do reach out if there's any issue, any other issue. Take care.